you all are putting on. And again, I'm really honored to be here. So as I mentioned, today I'm going to be, or as Lindsay mentioned, I'm going to be speaking to leadership habits that work for ICs and managers. And, a lot of what we'll kind of cover here is, you know, what I would consider very common patterns that I've seen my direct reports be able to really take advantage of. And so my hopes for you is that, these are very simple that you can actually take and apply in your organization, because I do believe that, habits that you form over time really do tend to make a difference in the long run. So let me actually get my presentation in front. I'm sorry. There we go. All right. So, number one, I'm really passionate about this, right? Like I lead design teams to help them reach their highest potential. And, I truly believe the work that we do as organizations play a big role in how product users experience the tools that we build and the value that it brings them. If you've ever been to any of my other talks, or if you've ever read any of my articles, which I'll provide a link for towards the end of the talk, I love getting into the details and nuances in regards to organizations and how they work. I've had an opportunity to work at small startup companies, early to mid stage, to large corporations like LinkedIn with over 10,000 people. On top of that, I've had an opportunity to collaborate with engineering teams in many different countries like Poland, India. I've had direct reports in Tel Aviv, New York. And so there's a number of different challenges that design teams tend to go through on top of the work that it takes to actually get the job done and actually be effective, right? Because one thing is about design and the influence that we have in organizations. It's not something that is progressive, right? Like it is going to come in waves. You're going to have some strong periods. You're going to have some weak periods. And so it's really important to make sure that you understand these scenarios as they come along. But, back to, these habits, there's really a lot of common questions. And I'm sure some of you all may have some of these challenges, right? Like you feel like you might not be getting ahead, right? Because you think like your work should speak for itself. Trying to understand how to build more influence. You want to have a seat at the table. At the same time, you don't want to get involved in politics. But also, it's really difficult to really understand how the work that you do can show up in your reviews, because ultimately that's how you're evaluated. And that's how you're able to potentially get ahead and get that promotion. And so I'm going to cover three things, right? And this will be just like the general rubric of my talk, right? So we're going to go over 3 leadership habits, right? How these habits scale, and just takeaways in terms of how these are can be of great impact and value for you as an IC or a manager. And so the first habit I like to really, and I think is a big unlock, is really ask questions that can lift the team. I think there's some scenarios that we might be familiar with, and I'm going to maybe break this out for you all because you may have been there before, right? So maybe leadership is doing planning for the next quarter, or maybe there's a project that you've been working on and your boss is going to present it. Now, sometimes you might feel like you're a little bit left out because you're not involved in the planning, or maybe your boss is presenting work that you've spent a lot of time and effort on, and perhaps maybe you might have more context in, but unfortunately, you're just not necessarily going to be in the room. There are some ways to actually still play an important role and become reliable in these situations, right? And so one of the things I like to say is ask a follow-up, right? Like, be that partner. What can I do to help you and the team show up better? Because ultimately, we are a team player, and your boss showing up to that table with leaders from engineering or product wants to look good as well. And so you can really help support them. On top of that, you can kind of follow up if there's anything that the group liked, right? What did they like? And in addition to that, is there a way that maybe we can improve the work to help you show up better next time? Most of these things are framed in regards to the, you know, in regards to you helping the leader, but that's also actually giving you some latent feedback as well. And it's going to help you get a little bit better context, right? So let me show you why I think this stuff is really valuable for you, right? Number one, it can help to drive results, right? It helps you build context, right? It positions you as a partner, and it also helps reduce the blind spots, right? Sometimes we're often really kind of dedicated and focused on our individual craft as designers. And so, we may be in those Figma files, we may be, in our weekly stand-ups with our direct teams building these things, but there's a whole world outside of that that comes down to prioritization, that might come to business need, that you actually might need to help frame some of the work and potentially get you ahead of any sort of changes that might come out. So here's how this shows up for you as an individual contributor, right? Like, you can stand out by being proactive and generally curious about team dynamics, right? These are things that show up in the reviews. And then for managers, you have an opportunity, if you are receptive to that, to model curiosity and also create psychological safety. These are really core things in terms of making sure your team is able to be adaptive and be efficient and effective. The second habit, I think, is to close with clarity. And so what I mean by that, let's go into these scenarios again, right? You've had your weekly sync with your manager, right? We'll call that your one-on-one. You may have completed your stand-up with your engineering and product manager. It's all good to have these types of conversations, but it does you no good if you don't have a follow-through. And so I think one of the things that's important here is to end every meeting by repeating the next step, right? This is a really great opportunity to practice active listening. So repeat the next steps and who those owners are. And if it's actually not clear, make sure that you find clarity in regards to who owns what by the end of the meeting. If you need to extend the meeting, do it, or schedule a follow-up. Doing these things early and often will actually prevent more churn later on. Here's some benefits as to why, right? Number one, it reinforces accountability, right? Your active listening strengthens your memory along with team alignment, and you don't have to deal with any of these later meetings and these churns that might be very repetitive, right? And so for you as an individual contributor, right, you're developing that reputation as being dependable and organized. And then on top of that, for managers, it can help prevent misalignment across functions. I know for myself, I work with more than 40 PMs, and there were about, I want to say, 6 group managers and 3 directors. So you can imagine leaving these meetings, it's very easy to lose track of, who owns what, or perhaps maybe what one team might own that the other team actually might have a dependency on. So doing these things can really help, really help understand that. And if it's documented, you can go back and reference that. I think the most impactful habit here is having a bias for action, and this is this is actually the habit I want to conclude with, right? And so let's give some example scenarios again, right? Let's say you have, 10 items on your plate, and it's not really clear what needs to be prioritized, or you have a design review where you've received feedback. Here's some ways that you can actually walk out of those situations showing up much stronger. I apologize for the sorry, guys. Number one, I think you can actually offer a path forward. So let's say you do have 10 items on your list. Really take some time to be thoughtful in regards to those priorities. Can they be tied to a business initiative? Can they be tied to revenue? Can they be tied to value? We're not necessarily asking you to be right, but provide some sort of thought process as to why you would approach things a certain way. All right. If you are in a situation where you are blocked, or maybe there are conflicting points of view, ask that question: what could I do on my part to help move this forward? One of the things I think is important about this is, for designers, we're faced in these situations quite a bit, right? We're faced with ambiguity. We don't necessarily know what the next step is. But I think it's important. It starts to actually show that you want to own the problem, right? You have a leadership mindset, and you are actually building more trust and actually a brand, in a sense of showing initiative rather than waiting. One of the worst things that you can do as an individual contributor is actually waiting for somebody to get back to you on the next step. It's likely that that person has to make a number of other decisions, and waiting for or coming back and a week later things aren't progressing may not necessarily show up for you in the best of life, right? And so I think it's really important for individual contributors to really prove you can move without formal authority. And then for managers, you can actually set the tone, right? It's about momentum, but we don't necessarily have to get all the steps done, but we want to make sure that we're moving forward with progress there. And so here's a few sort of closing thoughts for me that are a little bit broader, and have some images at least that you all can kind of take with you. So, we often look at organizations from a hierarchical perspective. And I think the challenge when we do those types of things is that we only sort of look at things from the top down. When you're looking at things from the top down, it's very difficult for you to develop a narrative. There's a lot of reliability in terms of maybe someone above you to have the answer. But the fact of the matter is, they may not always have the answer. They may be getting things with very sparing details, and they need to fill those in. You can be a really important part to helping fill those things in with detail. Also, leadership is about managing up, down, and across, right? So actually some of the scenarios that we talked about bring in this concept of managing up, down, and across. So managing up, really helping your team show up at an organizational leadership level really strong, right? Asking clarifying questions to your peers and your partners, and having that transparency as a manager to help influence your direct reports and have a stronger clarity in terms of the initiative and how their work ladders up to the business. So I think it's important for you all, just kind of leaving here, so put some thought in terms of where you want to see yourself and where you want to drive impact, because many of these things and these habits that you develop are purpose driven, right? They are hopefully going to be tied to results. And so one of the things I like to do, I showed you that hierarchy. One of the things I like to do is just kind of flip that diagram, right? Actually think about you in terms of how you can influence up to your team, your organization, product, and customers. All these things play a really important role with each other and can cascade up. So you can imagine those habits that I spoke to. You can actually imagine these at all four of these levels and how you might be able to be more impactful in those things. And that all goes to say that leadership isn't a title, right? It's a set of habits that anybody can practice. Hopefully you all can take some value out of these three habits that I think are most impactful for you. You can start practicing tomorrow. And if you want to learn a little bit more, of course, you can keep that conversation going on my Substack. I have a lot of articles on design leadership, the nuances and reflections on that, as well as podcasts, over 80 episodes actually. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn, where I post every once in a while on leadership. Thanks so much.